Osama bin Laden was the leader of al-Qaeda, a terrorist group. He played a major role in attacks that shocked the world, including the September 11th attacks in 2001. Al-Qaeda was founded in the late 1980s as a militant group with global ambitions. The name means the base in Arabic, reflecting its network of followers worldwide. Bin Laden became known for his ability to organize violent acts. He recruited many followers who shared his belief in using terror to challenge Western influence. One of the most infamous attacks linked to al-Qaeda was the 9/11 tragedy. This involved the hijacking of planes to target the U.S. World Trade Center and Pentagon. Nearly 3,000 people died during these attacks, making it one of the deadliest events in modern history. Bin Laden's name became known worldwide after this. Al-Qaeda grew over time, influencing groups in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Its global impact raised fears about terrorism and international security. Bin Laden's ideology was based on a mix of religion and politics. He accused Western countries of exploiting Muslim lands and called for violent resistance. Al-Qaeda's network grew under his leadership, using propaganda and militant training to spread its influence. Its actions changed how nations fought terrorism. The world remembers bin Laden not just for his role in terror, but also for how his actions reshaped global politics, especially after his death in 2011. Osama bin Laden was born in 1957 in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. He was one of more than 50 children of Mohammed bin Laden, a successful businessman. His father came from Yemen as a laborer, but grew wealthy through his construction company, which worked on projects for the Saudi royal family. Mohammed bin Laden's business success brought his family close to Saudi leaders, giving Osama a privileged upbringing and access to elite schools. Osama's father died in 1967 in a plane crash, but the family remained influential. Osama later studied at King Abdulaziz University in Jeddah. He focused on business administration and likely received religious instruction from scholars who supported strict Islamic views. Two key influences were Abdullah Azzam, a militant leader, and Muhammad Qutb, the brother of a famous Islamic revivalist, Sayyid Qutb. These mentors shaped Osama's religious and political ideas, helping him develop a radical view of Islam. He combined these beliefs with his business skills. His time at university gave him connections and knowledge that he later used to organize and fund al-Qaeda. Osama's education and experiences in Saudi Arabia set the foundation for his rise as a global figure. His early years reveal the roots of his later actions. In 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, sparking resistance from Afghan fighters. Osama bin Laden viewed this as an attack on Islam and joined the cause. Bin Laden used his wealth and connections to support the Afghan resistance. He traveled to meet leaders, recruit fighters, and raise funds for the war. By 1984, he had settled in Afghanistan and Pakistan, where he worked closely with Abdullah Azzam to organize Arab volunteers to fight the Soviets. Bin Laden's reputation for bravery and piety earned him respect among fighters. His financial support made him a key figure in the Afghan conflict. In 1988, he created a database of Arab volunteers, which became the foundation of a new group called al-Qaeda, meaning the base. At first, al-Qaeda lacked a clear purpose, but focused on organizing and training militants for future conflicts in the Muslim world. When the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan in 1989, bin Laden was seen as a hero by many. He returned to Saudi Arabia, but his radical ideas were growing. The war in Afghanistan was a turning point for bin Laden. It gave him the experience and network needed to build al-Qaeda into a powerful group. These early years shaped his vision of using militant Islam to confront perceived threats, setting the stage for future global terrorism. After returning to Saudi Arabia, Osama bin Laden saw the Gulf War in 1990 as a betrayal. He opposed the Saudi government's decision to host U.S. troops for protection. Bin Laden offered his own network of fighters to defend Saudi Arabia, but was rejected. This deepened his anger toward the Saudi leaders and the West. By 1991, his opposition became so strong that he left Saudi Arabia and settled in Sudan, where he expanded al-Qaeda's operations. In Sudan, bin Laden trained militants and created infrastructure for al-Qaeda. He began to focus on attacking Western nations, especially the United States. He issued public statements blaming the U.S. for exploiting Muslim countries and supporting corrupt governments in the Middle East. In 1996, bin Laden returned to Afghanistan after Sudan expelled him. The Taliban provided him shelter, allowing al-Qaeda to grow stronger. That same year, he issued his first fatwa, calling for holy war against the U.S. He claimed the West was stealing Muslim resources and harming Islamic lands. His second fatwa, in 1998, united many militant groups under his leadership. This marked the beginning of a focused al-Qaeda agenda. Bin Laden's ideology evolved into a global agenda of terrorism, aiming to provoke war and reshape the political order in the Muslim world. On September 11, 2001, al-Qaeda carried out a series of coordinated terrorist attacks in the United States. These attacks shocked the world and caused mass devastation. 19 militants hijacked 4 planes. 2 planes crashed into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York, causing their eventual collapse. A 3rd plane struck the Pentagon, the U.S. military headquarters near Washington, D.C. The 4th crashed in Pennsylvania after passengers fought the hijackers. The attacks killed nearly 3,000 people, making it the deadliest act of terrorism in history. Thousands more were injured, and many families were left grieving. Al-Qaeda chose these targets carefully. The World Trade Center symbolized economic power, and the Pentagon represented U.S. military strength. The 4th plane, believed to be aimed at the U.S. Capitol, or White House, was stopped by the bravery of passengers who sacrificed their lives. The scale of the attacks and their coordination demonstrated al-Qaeda's capability as a global terrorist network. Bin Laden's role as mastermind became widely known. The events led to international outrage and a global effort to combat terrorism. Countries around the world pledged support to the United States. Bin Laden later claimed responsibility for the attacks, justifying them as a response to U.S. policies in the Muslim world, especially in the Middle East. The September 11 attacks reshaped global security policies. Nations strengthened anti-terrorism laws, and air travel became subject to stricter controls. The attacks also prompted the U.S. to launch the War on Terror, which included military action in Afghanistan to dismantle al-Qaeda and remove the Taliban. These events marked a turning point in history, changing the world's perception of security and the threats posed by extremist groups like al-Qaeda. After the September 11 attacks, the U.S. launched the War on Terror, focusing on dismantling al-Qaeda and capturing Osama bin Laden. In October 2001, U.S.-led forces invaded Afghanistan, targeting the Taliban, who sheltered al-Qaeda. The Taliban quickly lost power, but bin Laden escaped. He fled into hiding, reportedly moving between remote areas along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. His ability to evade capture frustrated U.S. forces. In December 2001, bin Laden was nearly captured at Tora Bora, a mountain complex in Afghanistan. However, he managed to slip away. U.S. intelligence and military teams continued their search for years, using drones, local informants, and advanced technology to track him. During this time, bin Laden released audio and video messages to inspire al-Qaeda followers and threaten further attacks against the U.S. and its allies. These messages served as propaganda for al-Qaeda, showing that bin Laden remained influential despite being in hiding. Al-Qaeda continued its operations, carrying out attacks in places like Spain, Indonesia, and the UK, further spreading global fear. Bin Laden's years in hiding showed his skill in avoiding detection and maintaining communication with his network. His whereabouts became a global mystery. U.S. efforts included building international alliances to fight terrorism. Many countries provided intelligence and support for the global hunt. Despite these efforts, bin Laden remained hidden for almost a decade, becoming a symbol of defiance against the U.S. His evasion led some to question the effectiveness of global counterterrorism strategies and the cost of the War on Terror. In 2011, after years of searching, U.S. intelligence discovered Osama bin Laden hiding in a fortified compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. The compound was located near a military academy, raising questions about whether bin Laden had local support to stay hidden. President Barack Obama authorized a high-risk operation to capture or kill bin Laden, led by U.S. Navy SEALs. On May 2, 2011, the SEALs launched a nighttime raid using helicopters to reach the compound. The operation was planned to avoid detection. The SEALs stormed the building, engaging in a brief firefight. Bin Laden was killed during the raid, along with several others. His body was identified using DNA testing to confirm his identity. It was later buried at sea to prevent his grave from becoming a shrine. Hours after the operation, President Obama announced bin Laden's death, calling it a major victory in the fight against terrorism. The news was met with global reactions. Some celebrated the end of his leadership, while others worried about possible retaliation by al-Qaeda. Bin Laden's death marked a turning point in the war on terror, though it did not end the threat posed by al-Qaeda and its affiliates. Osama bin Laden's death in 2011 weakened al-Qaeda, but the group remained active under new leadership. Ayman al-Zawahiri succeeded bin Laden as its leader. Al-Qaeda evolved into a network of regional affiliates, including groups in Yemen, North Africa, and Southeast Asia. These groups operated more independently. While al-Qaeda's central command lost strength, its ideology inspired other militant groups, leading to the rise of organizations like ISIS. Al-Qaeda's influence remained significant in areas with weak governments or ongoing conflicts, where extremist ideas could easily spread. The group continued to carry out smaller-scale attacks, using propaganda to recruit new members and spread fear globally. Even after bin Laden's death, al-Qaeda's vision of a global jihad continued to shape international security concerns and counterterrorism strategies. Governments around the world increased efforts to combat terrorism, focusing on intelligence sharing, military actions, and monitoring online activities. However, al-Qaeda's adaptability and ability to inspire lone wolf attacks made it a persistent threat even years after its peak. Bin Laden's legacy is seen as both destructive and transformative, shaping how nations approach global security and the fight against extremism. While al-Qaeda no longer holds the same power it did during bin Laden's leadership, its ideas continue to influence extremist movements worldwide. The world remembers bin Laden as a figure who caused immense harm, but also as a man whose actions reshaped global politics and security policies. His life and death highlight the long-lasting impact of terrorism and the need for unity in addressing its root causes.